Felicia Wilson, and I'm with Care Talk. I want to share with you a moment why this is so important for me. I think around 2006, maybe, I started working with survivors of human trafficking, and I call them survivors, not victims, intentionally, because they survive horrific violations against their bodies, against their spirit, their person. So when I started working with these young ladies, all under the age of 18, my heart was truly broken because I'm sitting here listening to babies, the youngest was 13, who had been raped multiple times, who had been physically abused, who experienced substance abuse, all at the hands of individuals who were gaining financial success from violating these children. So after that experience and working with them, I realized that my knowledge and my therapeutic work was just simply not enough. I wanted to inform people so that if nothing else, you could be aware of your surrounding. I tell you that my vigilance when I go downtown with my daughters, I have 3 of them, is on high alert, because before I would have just aimlessly walked the street and not been aware. Now things that I know to look for stick out to me. So hopefully this information will empower you to protect yourself, your families, and I'm hopeful that you will be willing to take what knowledge you have, share it with other people so that they too can be protected, but also support the people who are on the ground doing the work. We have a lot of people here who do this every single day. It is part of their profession, but also their calling just to go out into the community to try to make things a little bit better. So my first question of the night is, are there any direct clinicians in the room? No. Okay, so we have, I know we have a lot of law enforcement. So do we have any people from any agencies that primarily deal with children? Well, where y'all from? Children? Yes, okay. So, and the rest of us are just community members seeking awareness? Is that? Okay, awesome. Well, the way we're going to start this evening, Loronda Giddens from Inner Peace is going to give us an overview kind of what is human trafficking. And I think once you all hear that, you will have a better understanding of what it is not and how prevalent it is. Then we have Jeff and Tammy Davis, who will come and they will share with you some restorative programs that are available in our community. And then we have DeKalb County's DA, right, that's you, right? Okay, okay, she's gonna come, and I always like to tell people, I'm the therapeutic, warm and fuzzy side, and then we have the criminal justice side, which is a stark difference. So I will let her share with you the criminal justice side and how the prosecution addresses this crime. At the end of that, we will have open question and answers. So feel free to go to the microphone and we will answer your questions as best we can, okay? All right, Ms. Loronda. Now, I will forewarn you, this is not a warm, fuzzy topic, and it is very troubling, but we can do some debriefing at the end if we need to do that. We can walk you through that process. Ready?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming out. I've been doing a lot of training over the last 4 years on this topic, and I must say that out of all the people that I've wanted to speak to the most, you are the ones that come to mind first on my list. The majority of the people that I work with and the majority of people that I do training with are juvenile justice professionals or people that work in an organization that serve kids. But the people that I really wanted to talk to are people in the community, because the community is not aware of the pervasiveness, that's happening in our city, that's happening in the United States. Most people think that it's happening in some other country, but it's happening right here in the state of Georgia. It's pervasive in Columbus, it's pervasive in Savannah. Most people think it's just happening in the city of Atlanta. Go to Rome, go up in the North Georgia mountains, South Georgia, anywhere in Georgia, sex trafficking is happening. So before we get started into all these different presentations, I want to know what you all know about sex trafficking. So the first thing I want to know is, when I write the word sex trafficking up here, excuse my back, give me one word, the first word that you think of, one word. Yeah, that'd be great. Prostitution. Babies. Prostitution, babies. More words. Scumbags. Trapped. Money. Coercion. Money, force, government. Okay, what was that? Drugs, more words, sex trafficking, one word, what do you think? What comes to mind? Perverts. Sir, you smile, what was that smile? What was that thought? You somewhere else? Okay. Another word. Evil. Destruction. Trap. Somebody else said that. Illegal. Illegals. Okay. Enslavement. Let's start thinking about children. So when you think about children and you think about sex trafficking, what words come to mind? Helpless. Innocent. Runaways. Kidnapped. Sex trafficking in children. We're talking 12-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 10-year-olds. We're not talking about adults, we're talking about children. Internet. Internet. What else? Homeless. Okay, that's a pretty good list. Okay, so the person that said illegals, what was your thought on that?
My thought is a lot of times people are promised opportunities or something and be caught.
Okay, so a situation where someone is in another country and they're promised that when they get here they can go to school or they can work and send money back to their families, and when they get here they take their passport. And then they're caught in a situation where they don't have a choice but to do what that exploiter says. Okay, someone said government. What's government? Tell me the idea behind government. Okay. Okay, someone said hopeless. Hopelessness, hopeless. Was it up here? I heard that. Okay. Runaways. Somebody said runaways. Back here, I believe that was. Tell me about runaways. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I was watching a Dateline special a couple of years ago, and there was an exploiter on there, and what he said was he would sit at the bus station, he would sit at the train station, and he would sit and he would watch and he would wait. And he knew what kid he was going to approach for sex. And the way he was able to tell that is by the way that kid's body moved. Just by the way that kid walked across the platform or walked through that bus station or walked through that train station, physical movement that he was studying, he could tell which kid was vulnerable just by the way that kid's body moved. And that just literally sent chills down up my spine, just thinking that someone is sitting and waiting at a bus station or a train station or in the mall, waiting for a kid to walk by to see who they're going to approach to buy sex, to deceive and to exploit. What other words? I'm sorry? Predatory behavior. Predatory behavior. Absolutely. Internet. Who said internet? Tell me about that. Absolutely. 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 I was listening to another special. They were talking about gang members, how gang members go online, they go on Instagram and Facebook and all these different social media platforms, and they said the girls that, you know, have the pictures where their head is down and they've got their hair kind of covering their face, those are the girls they're going to approach and befriend because obviously they're having some issues with self-esteem. So those girls are vulnerable and those are the ones that they go after. Force and coercion. Who said force and coercion? I think I heard force over here. Tell me about force.
I'm not sure how to say, but a lot of times it's the people who they trust, guardians, even sometimes their parents.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting that you say about families. Have you all ever heard familial pimping? Have you heard that term? You say yes. Tell me what familial pimping is. I'm going to give you the mic.
I got candy in my mouth.
It's okay.
Familiar pimping is that of uncle, aunt, brother, sister, cousin, somebody that you're familiar with and close to that can lure you in and be that familiar person that you're close to that will just be that person that comforts you and get you into doing something and will say things that will make you do things that are not of good nature, and then will tell you, don't tell your mom or tell your dad or tell somebody because they're going to get in trouble or whatever, but you feel comfortable with this person because they're your uncle, your dad, your mom, your sister, your brother, whatever. You're familiar with them and you're close to them. And so you're keeping this deep down secret all of your life or however long until you can finally tell someone, and that's that familiar person.
Absolutely. Thank you. We had a mother who was a drug addict. She had a problem with heroin, and in order to get her drug supply, she would sell her 4-year-old daughter. We had another family who purchased a car at one of those buy here, pay here lots. They couldn't afford to pay the monthly rent on the car, so they would invite the owner of the car lot to come have sex with their children. So when we talk about sex trafficking, we think about some stranger or some van pulling up and snatching kids off the streets and selling them into the sex trade. It's people that these kids know. It's their friends. Kids are being recruited at schools. Kids are being recruited at the football game on Friday night. Wherever kids are, there's a possibility, there's a potential for that kid to be recruited into sex. I was talking to a young girl just Monday. What's today? Today's Thursday. On Tuesday, I was having a conversation with a group of girls. We were talking about sex trafficking. And one of the young ladies told me she was a chronic runaway. She was in a foster care home. She didn't want to be there, so she did what she normally does. She ran. I said, well, where did you go? She said, well, a friend of mine who I call my brother, her brother, said I can come and stay with him. So when she got to the house, the owner of the house was an older gentleman. He probably was about maybe 35 years old. He was a known drug dealer on the streets. Drug dealing, he was into prostitution. And what she said was there were other girls in that house with her. There probably was maybe 5 or 6 other girls in the house with her. But there was an older girl in the house, maybe about 20 years old, who was the babysitter. And excuse what I'm about to say, but she's the bottom bitch. She's the one who's closest to the pimp, who makes sure all the other girls stay in line. So now she's in this house with all these other girls, these 2 grown men, and what she told me was when she was a freshman in high school, she was a recruiter. She said everybody in the house had a job. Either you were selling sex, you were selling drugs, or you were recruiting. And she was the recruiter. A 9th grader at 15 years old, she's 17-year-old now, but at 15 years old, these exploiters had her in the school recruiting other kids. And she said all the girls that she knew aspired to be a stripper or to sell sex. That was their greatest aspiration in life, was to be a stripper and to sell sex. And I said, why was that? Why was that the case? And she said, that's the only thing they felt that they knew how to do. They didn't feel like they could do anything else but sell sex or take their clothes off. No one ever told them that they can do and be something different. That's why they thought that they could only just have sex and sell their bodies and show their bodies for money. And it's always interesting to me how these kids are able to just open up and just kind of tell me things. They, you know, they're a little uncomfortable at first, but then after a while they warm up and they just start telling you everything. They tell everything. So the one word I want to take off the list is the word prostitution. Let's just eliminate that because we're talking about kids. Talking about children. What's the age of consent in Georgia? 16. So if you're 14 years old, can you consent to sex? Can you sell sex legally? So they're not prostitutes, they're victims. They're victims of crime. They're being exploited, they're being abused, and they're being neglected. Brutally beaten, these kids are. And I always hear people say, well, they're prostitutes. They're prostitutes. No, they're not prostitutes. There was a young man, we didn't talk about boys. It's not just happening to girls, it's happening to boys as well. It's happening to boys and girls. And I had this young man tell me, I walked in to see him, to visit with him, and he stood maybe this tall, just a little boy. And he liked to dress in girls' clothes. And he was a chronic runaway too, because his mother did not want him wearing girls' clothes. It was unacceptable in her household, so she kicked him out. And what did he do? I mean, where does a kid go at 12 and 14 and 13 and 12 and 10 years old? Where does a kid go? Where do they go when they run away from home? Where do you go? So this kid would stand in front of Walmart and ask for loose change. Ma'am, do you have loose change? Loose change. So this woman comes along and says, hey, I can teach you how to make more money than this. You're out here crawling around for loose change. I can show you how to make some real money. And of course, his little eyes just lit up. And he went with her. And when he got to the house, there were several other boys in the house that looked just like him, same age. But the conversation that I had with him the first time I laid eyes on him was about prostitution. He thought he was a prostitute. At 14 years old, this tall, he thought he was a prostitute. And I told him, I said, you're a victim of a crime. Do you understand that? He did not understand that. I could not make him a victim. And I said to him, and literally it was, I'm a prostitute. No, you're a victim. So this is a conversation we're having back and forth for a good 2 or 3 minutes. We're going back and forth. It was like watching a tennis match. And finally he said, you know what, Miss Loronda, every person that I've ever talked to, every judge, every police officer, every social worker, every probation officer, every person that I've ever come in contact with has always called me a prostitute. I said, well, the next time somebody calls you a prostitute, you tell them that Miss Loronda said that you're a victim of a crime. But no matter how long I talked to him, he didn't understand the fact that he was being victimized. He knew that his life was in danger because he was on the streets dressed as a girl. So the person that picked him up thought he was a girl until that person touched his genitals and found out he was a boy. And when they found that out, sometimes he would get the crap beat out of him. You had a question?
A 9-year-old came in that was pregnant, and her older brother was selling her for money. And I'm a Christian counselor. If you tell me something, I'm obligated. And they showed a video that kind of contradicted that, so I had to explain. If they tell me something, I have to report that. They said they do that they automatically take care of that. The little girl went home to DFACS, and the boy went to jail, but 9 years old, selling.
Yeah, kids are being sold at very young ages, and I know it is extremely disturbing to hear that people are selling children. It's disturbing. But the reality is, this is what's happening in our community. Like in our community, right around the corner, down the street, things are happening, and we don't even, that's my phone, sorry. And we're not even aware of it. So that's why I'm really glad that you all are here tonight, so we can educate you about what's really happening in our city. So what's coming up next year that's major, that's huge in this city, that everybody is looking forward to? The Super Bowl. So I was driving down 75 when I heard the news. I was going to a training to train a group of people, and when I heard that the Super Bowl is coming to Atlanta, literally the hair on the back of my neck stood up, because I knew that kids were going to be exploited. Major sporting events, major conferences, major music events, anything major that's happening in our city, understand that kids are being sold for sex. Okay, so we're good on this list for now. I just wanted to see what you all knew, but I want to show you a video about how this happens. It's called The Making of a Girl. And this whole thing is called The Life. This is what this is. So you're going to get a really good view on how this happens, because most people, y'all are looking at me like, well, Loronda, how in the world is this stuff happening? It's happening.
You know, you're 12 years old and you're living with your moms, and your mom's is struggling because she didn't think that life was really going to work out like this for her, and she doesn't have a man around, and the men that are around haven't always been that great. Sexual abuse is becoming kind of normal for you, and you think that other people don't have secrets that are as bad as you, and maybe you've tried to talk to somebody at school and they haven't really heard you, or maybe they just haven't had time to listen to you. And so you're seeing these girls on the videos, and they're so pretty and they're so sexy, and so your way at 12 of escaping into this fantasy world is to think about what it must be like to be one of these girls, and you know that adult men already look at you, and you wonder how you can kind of use that.
I was just a child, and that's how I was supposed to live, like a child and like an adult.
So one day you're coming out of school and there's a guy outside in a Cadillac, and he's nice looking. I mean, he's got the baseball cap and the jeans and the Timbs, and he tells you how pretty you are, and you know how pretty your hair looks, and it's been a while since anybody even really noticed anything about you. And for the first time, you feel like somebody's really interested in you, because now all of a sudden he's asking you about your dreams and your hopes and where your father's at, and he says that he can be a daddy to you.
The people that I shouldn't have depended on, I was depending on for support.
And so that night he takes you to a club, and he puts you up on the stage, and he gives you a few drinks, and there's men throwing dollars at you, and it's scary, but all the time you're just looking at his face in the back of the room, and he's like, you know, go ahead, baby girl, go ahead, you're doing it for daddy. And you're feeling proud because nobody's ever said that to you. And so then that night he tells you that there's more stuff that you've got to do, and he takes you into a room, and there's a man there, and he tells you to strip, and you think this is something you'll never do, and yet there's a part of you that already knew how to do this, because that's what your stepfather's been doing to you all these years before. And so you turn that trick, and it's like a part of you has died inside. And so you come out of the club that night, and you get in the car, and you know he's pumping 50 Cent, and he takes you to McDonald's, and he tells you, you did a good job tonight, sweetie. And he's stuffing his pockets with the $1,000 that he made. And right now, you're happy.
The people that I shouldn't have depended on, I was depending on for support.
You feel like this is the best that it's ever going to get. And everything else in your life has prepared you for this moment. All the sexual abuse, or the neglect, or the drama, or the pain, or the trauma has prepared you for tonight, where you stepped across a line that you always thought you'd never really quite step across. And you don't realize that night what it will be like to be on the track and get raped. And you don't realize that daddy isn't really going to protect you. You don't realize what it's like to have a gun held to your head that night. You don't realize what it's going to be like when you catch your first STD. You don't realize what it's going to be like when you first come home and daddy beats you for the first time because you didn't make enough money. You don't know what it's going to be like to have cops offer to trade sex with you in exchange for not being arrested. And then sometimes you'll do that and they'll still lock you up anyway. You don't know what it's like to sit up in jail and know that you just made $1,500 for your pimp last night, but he won't come down and put $200 bail on just to get you out a few days early. You don't know what it's like to walk down the street at 6 o'clock in the morning when you're just getting off work and people are starting their day and they see you and they know what you do and they look at you in a way that you just don't feel like you belong in that world anymore. And you don't know what it's like to feel like you've lost part of yourself along the way and to feel like you'll never leave. And no matter how many times you try to leave, he'll always find you and catch you. But that night, all you care about is the fact you're riding in a Cadillac and you're eating McDonald's and you're listening to 50 and you got this one man who you really think loves you sitting right by your side.
So this person that you heard narrating this video, her name is Rachel Lloyd, and she's a huge advocate for kids that have been in sex trafficking. She was a victim of sex trafficking, and she started an agency some years ago called GEMS, and she's up in New York, and she's amazing. I had an opportunity to meet Rachel at the Summit to End Sex Trafficking. It was a world President Carter has an initiative to end sex trafficking by 2025. And he had a huge summit down at the Jimmy Carter Center back in 2015. That's where I had a chance to meet Rachel. And one of the things that Rachel says is, you know, there's so much money out there, so much federal money out there as it relates to human trafficking, but the money is not funneling down to the grassroots organizations like hers. Boots on the ground, literally when she first got started, she was walking the streets of New York, rescuing kids, bringing them back to her place. They were eating her food, sleeping on the floor. So kids were everywhere, but she wanted somewhere for these kids to be safe. So that's what she was able to do, was start this amazing program where she teaches kids life skills. She helps them with their education, helps them with job placement, and she's just amazing. She's an amazing individual, and she goes all around the world speaking about sex trafficking. She's a major advocate for it. I wanted to bring up someone, a friend and a colleague of mine. Her name is Star Davis. And she's a former public defender, and she quit her job last year because she's so passionate about helping kids. So, Ms. Star Davis, if you can come up, please, and tell us about the Star Institute.
Hi, everyone. Oh, I know it's late. Hi, everyone. Okay, if I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, so if I'm up here amped, y'all got to be amped with me. Thank you, Loronda, for sharing your platform with me. I'll just be before you briefly. I just want to say thank you for being here today. Your presence here speaks volumes. And the fact that you showed up means a lot to a child. And I can tell you that because I was that at-risk girl that Loronda has been speaking to you about. So when I was 7 years old, 2 of my older male cousins began molesting me. And the molestation went on for years. When I was 7 years old, my mom became addicted to drugs. And so at that young age, I witnessed her being physically, mentally, and verbally abused. And so there was a period in my life where I bounced around from house to house of different family members. And finally, the thing that saved my life was my grandmother. She made a decision to take me in and raise me as her own, right? And so it's because of my grandmother's love and her commitment to my well-being that I can stand before you today, the woman that I am. And that woman is a mother. I'm a wife. I'm a criminal defense attorney. What Loronda said is I used to be a public defender in Fulton County. I was there for over 5 years. And I'm an advocate for girls like me. And so that's why I started the STAR Institute. The STAR Institute is a nonprofit organization that seeks to provide resources to girls who have been victimized by sexual abuse or exploitation, right? Just this week alone, I have had the opportunity of hearing the stories of 5 triumphant survivors, right? Some were girls, some were women. And when I say girls, I mean the ages of 12 to 17, right? And so they were very vulnerable. They were transparent. They shared their lives with us. They gave us a glimpse of what they have been able to overcome. And there was one survivor in particular who told us about how, in her words, her pimp left her alone with the phone, and that was totally unheard of, right? So he left her alone, and she was like, let me wait till the coast is clear, grab the phone, quick, I'm just gonna Google, right? How to get out of sex trafficking. You know what she said? Not one organization came up. Not one. Not one place came up, right? She only has a few seconds. Not one place came up. Now, what she did say she saw, right? She saw blogs from other survivors and how they were able to overcome. But she didn't see anything, nothing that could happen. So imagine, she got this strength up. I'm going to do this search. I only have a little bit of time. What happens if she gets a little bit of time to get out of there and she has nowhere to go, right? So that's what she said. So that's why the STAR Institute exists, right? I don't know if you know or not, but in Metro Atlanta, there is one organization that is dedicated solely to providing housing for girls. And when I say girls, I mean ages 12 to 17, providing houses for them. That organization is phenomenal. They have 15 beds. That's it. 15 beds. We need more beds because on average in Georgia, 100 girls are trafficked a night. And you know the numbers are skewed because not everyone is reporting, so we'll never know the full ramification of how this works, right? But on average, so that is what the STAR Institute is all about. I am committed to bringing safe homes all throughout Metro Atlanta, and I need your help, right? I was that girl. I couldn't understand this as the 7-year-old, why I was going through all the things that I did. You know, why me is what I asked God a lot. Why? But now on the other side of this, I know it was for this purpose. And my goal is to be what my grandmother was to me, to so many other girls. So I just ask that you would join me in this charge. You're here, you're getting the information. Please don't let it fall on deaf ears. Do something. You know what I'm saying? It's time. It's not just money. It's time. It's donating products. It's extending yourself. And that's all we need because these are our children. Everyone might not have children, but you have a niece, you have a nephew, you have a friend, you have somebody. I just would like for you all to get in mind some child, any child that means anything to you. Think about what you would do for that child if they needed you. And that's what I'm asking you to do to help all of these other girls that I'm trying to help. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move right along. I'm going to bring up Jeff and Tammy Davis. They're from Out of Darkness. I've worked with Out of Darkness now, you guys can come on, for about 4 years now. And I say that because Loronda is kind of like a triangle thing, Loronda, me, Out of Darkness. And the whole goal, as Star said, is just to inform, empower, so that we can make change. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the Davises.
I'll go ahead then and introduce us, being that he's hooking up the technology part. Unless you want to. Okay, my name's Tammy Davis. This is my husband, Jeff. We moved here from Tampa, Florida 5 years ago, and would have never thought we were in the position we were now. Probably like some of you, never even heard of sex trafficking. We joined this church, and they had Susan Norris. Some of you may have heard of you, but she has written a book, and she has started a foundation. And then, it was a few months later, we had Jeff Shaw come to the church from Out of Darkness. And it just touched us so much, we had to get involved. Him into rescuing, me, ambassador. Now that we've been through the training and we've been in part of Out of Darkness for 3 years now, we do rescues and we're ambassadors. I have to say the rescues are what has touched our hearts the very most. We don't work with the young children. Hearing your talk, I really would love to get more involved with the kids. We can only pick them up if they're 18 or older. If they're younger than 18, then DFACS or Georgia Cares is called in. However, the young ladies, or the ladies of all ages, I've learned, have touched our hearts. Their stories are so much of what you had said that they start at such a young age. So, Out of Darkness is part of the Atlanta Dream Center, which is downtown. It was founded by Jeff Shaw in 2011. The mission is to reach, rescue, and restore all victims of commercial sex exploitation. And because it is a faith-based organization, it's for the glory of God. You want to go in here with me? Turning it over to the numbers guy.
Okay. Hello. When we were first brought into this or heard about it, we heard about it from Jeff Shaw, and to touch bases with what the other ladies had spoken about, we were told there was a young lady going through the programs. She's trying to be rehabilitated back into society. Okay? She was 5 years old, and she was put there by her dad on her 5th birthday. And her dad said, "You were born for this." And that's where she got involved in it. Having lost a daughter to a brain tumor at 11 months old, okay, that hit hard, okay? That's when Tam and I started getting into this, okay? So some of the numbers up here, if you'll just look at some of the numbers on the top and the bottom and see what some of the brutal facts are. What we'll do is we'll explain what these numbers are and what they mean as far as the human trafficking side, okay? The 13, to touch on, the average age is between 11 and 14. It varies between 11 and 14, some 12, some 13, depending on the statistics that you look at. They are sometimes runaways. They are sometimes tricked, like it's been touched on with the modeling careers, or You're So Beautiful, to touch on something else. There are people out in the malls that say, with the body language, they're walking by, they're depressed, they're sitting on a bench by themselves, nobody's talking to them, they have no, "Well, I'll be your friend." And it starts off with that little conversation with, "Hi, how you doing, are you okay?" to the point of later on finding, "Okay, I know somebody that could put you into modeling. Meet me here." Okay, once they get on the plane, numbers are out. Okay, okay. 32,000 is what the pimps are looking at on average of what they're making. Okay, big global picture, it's about 290 million a year. Okay, the ladies in the homes are the pimps. They are called their stable. Okay. And we'll touch on that a little bit as well. But the ladies in the stable have a certain amount that they're supposed to bring home every night. We've heard stories from some of the young ladies and gentlemen that have been rescued. I've actually been a part of 3 men rescues as well. They go through the same thing. A lot of that is their egos are writing checks. Okay? I don't want anybody to know I'm a male. I don't want anybody to know this has happened to me. So they keep their mouth shut and they don't say a word. Okay? But I have seen both the male and the female side. But the ladies, to touch on the meal at McDonald's, some of them have told us in stories, if you don't make the money you're supposed to be making, you don't eat tonight. Or if you don't make the money you're supposed to be making, you sleep in a dog kennel during the day. Okay, that's actually true stories from survivors that we've talked to. On average, the life expectancy of someone in trafficking is 7 years. Okay? We've rescued women anywhere from 18 to 56. If you don't make the money when you start aging and you're still in the life, if you don't make the money that they want you to make, they put you out on the street and say you earn what you can. Okay? If you're young, you're pretty, you're still making a lot of money, you'll be in a hotel room at night. But during the day, you're in a dog kennel if you don't make the money you're supposed to be making. Okay? The mission of Out of Darkness is to reach, rescue, and restore. Some of the things we do, one of them is Princess Night. One night a week, Out of Darkness sends 2 vans down to a high traffic area. 12 to 14 women and 2 guys in each van. The guy, one is the driver, the other one's the security to open the doors and make sure that he's got the eyes out everywhere. 4 women will get out of the van each time they stop. Okay? They'll walk up to the ladies of the evening. They're not there to say, okay, get my hand, let's go. They're there to say, here's a rose, here's a card or a lip gloss. What can we pray for you about? What can we do to pray for you? Okay? There are nights, one night, actually 2 nights. One night in particular, I'd gotten out of the van. Tammy was inside the van. It just wasn't her time to step out and talk to the ladies. I'm sitting here, and the 2 girls bolted. The 4 girls in the van came back. So I'm standing here, and I could see these ladies through my peripheral. I saw a guy get off the bottom of a lamppost. When he got up, I turned to walk toward him, so it would be a face-to-face. He got 3 foot away from me. Guess what his comment to me was? Would you pray for me? Okay? The guys, some of them don't want to be there either. But they're there because, like they've said, that's all they know. Okay? Another story. A gentleman got out of the van. A pimp was walking up. The driver got out and said, what can I do for you? Well, you can't do nothing for me. Well, we've got big arms. Let's see what we can do. I want a drum set. The driver of the van just so happened to say, I've got a drum set I was taking to Goodwill tomorrow. Meet me here tomorrow morning at 10:30. I'll get you a drum set. The pimp met him there the next morning at 10:30. He got his drum set. 2 years later, the driver saw the same gentleman that came up to him. Gave him 2 tickets, and he said, what are these? He said, you don't remember me, do you? He said, I'm the gentleman you gave the drum set to. These tickets, when you gave me the drum set, I started a Christian band. We've got a concert tonight. Here's 2 tickets to the concert. Okay? There are stories out there. Okay? There are stories. Okay? Just like the ladies before, I'm more the in-depth. She's the kinder, gentler. So we're trying to at least even this out a little bit. Okay, you want to go to the other ministries?
Yeah. We're excited about Douglasville calling us in. We don't live too far from here. And we had mentioned that our heart and soul right now and passion is with the rescue team. And we were called to do a rescue just about 3 weeks ago at the Douglasville jail. She had been in there. She had come up from Florida. And I think she was there for like 6 months. And I had said, oh, how did you find out? I'm always fascinated at how they find out about us. I said, how did you find out about Out of Darkness? I said, did somebody from the jail ministry come in and talk to you? And she goes, no, they don't have the jail ministry at the Douglasville jail. So where's that chief? I'm going to be after him. And I'm sorry? Oh, okay. And I don't know where she was then. So, but she said one of the officers in there had talked to somebody else that recommended Out of Darkness. And happy to say that she's in her program and doing really good right now. So jail ministry, we're in several of the counties, and there is a team of people that go and they just talk with the ladies and give them a Bible and share prayers with them or anything that they just need to talk about. It's kind of like a mentor group. Then there's a medical team. And a medical team, they talk to different fire EMS, firemen, police station, hospitals, doctors, for signs of what to look for when they run into a lady or gentleman that may need some help. And then there's the rescue. Now, the rescue team is kind of neat. It's a man and a woman, and the male is a driver, and the female is the one who actually talks to the young lady. And basically, it's not to persuade them. It's not to, they don't even have to talk to us if they don't want to. Usually, I think you had mentioned that after you get to know them a little bit and get talking to them, they really want to talk. They just kind of open up their souls and want to share, and it's heartbreaking. It's so rewarding, though, too, to see how much they want the help. We had one lady say, you're our heroes. And I said, oh, no. I think you're the brave one, because not only did you call the hotline for strangers to come get you in a strained car to take you to a safe house where you don't know where you're going. And you've just been through so much. So I'm not the hero. You are definitely the hero to take this first step. Because a lot of these ladies, especially in their 20s, started at that 11 and 12, and their stories are just unbelievable. So for them to take that step to want to go to a safe house and get help is just, from strangers, is really amazing. The 1,000 plus, I think we're up to, what, 1,200 now? The 1,000 plus is how many rescues we've done since 2011. When we crossed over on that in January, we were like, yes. Do they all make it? No, the chances for relapse is high. But we have seen so many positive rescues and young ladies who have gone to their programs that it gives us that spark that really they do it. They do say that sometimes it takes 4, 5 rescues, chance at the safe house, to go back into their programs. And it's almost like we're planting those seeds, and we're so excited when we start seeing those successes. Okay. And it costs about $7,500 a year for a girl to go to a program. So it's really well worth it, because you see the excitement. We have one girl that was part of one of our rescues right now. That's the Atlanta Dream Center, or the Atlanta School of Ministry, who's getting ready to go on a mission project. And so to think that this girl who had started in her at age 16, who has had a really rough few years, the last 2 years, you see such beautiful success and the spark in her. And we've got several others. The life. Who are they? These are some of the many faces. Yes, coming from other countries. Some of you said that. Forced marriage. You wouldn't think that happens too much anymore. You'd think that was sign of old world stuff, but it really is going on. Sometimes it's forced because they don't feel like there's any other way for support or to go. Debt bondage. They owe money. I did this for you, so you have to do this for me. Trafficked as a child. And that's where your families, familia, prostitution comes in. And I hate that word. Just, involuntary domestic. One of the things Jeff talked about was we had met this one lady, and she was a little older, and I guess we might have looked a little surprised because she was a little older, but she was kind of funny. But she had told us, you know, it's not just the pretty ones that are trafficked. We're trafficked for so long, and then when they don't need us, they make us work. She also told us she had been in a rehab 7 times, but every time she got out, he always found her and ended it back up into it, and then was into domestic service. And her words were to us, you don't turn down a guy with a fist and a knife and a gun. And it was kind of, you know, ooh. Some warning signs. You know, when we said that the average age of intake is 11 to 14, think about that middle school child. You know, you could say they go through every one of these. But if it's something that is constant, something that you see happening all the time, you know, oh, suddenly they have expensive things. Well, maybe they borrowed something. But if it's a continual thing and it's things you hadn't seen before, it's something to check into. Unexplained change in behavior. You know, are they skipping school a lot? You see some real behavior changes that are starting to worry, violent or withdrawn, absent from school. Drug use. This is the big one, the older boyfriend. If you're at a mall and you see a couple walking around the mall and the child looks about 13, 12, 13, but the person is 40, 50, and you notice that it doesn't look like a father and daughter or a grandfather and granddaughter, it's probably time to call. Get some investigations going. Huge drop in grades, depression, anxiety. You know, all of them can be middle school. But if it's a continual or more than one of those, it's something definitely to look into. What does the trafficker look like? Well, these were just some cases that through the last 5 or 6 years, you know, trafficked their brothers and sisters. I think they mentioned family. This one was on the news, sold a 12-year-old in Cobb County. Trafficked their daughter to make a car payment. It's car payment, apartment rent, food. The man on the end was on the news, paid to have sex with 12-year-olds. Our internet has become a huge source, especially now that these kids can play games with people. I think you just saw something on the news about an 11-year-old girl. Our kids are so susceptible to these people online, and they don't know who they're talking to. They don't know who they're playing with. There's not a name or a face. So they believe whatever's told with them. These guys are clever. They're very savvy. They don't come and they work with these kids in a week and then they're gone. They get to know them. They get to know what their strengths are. They get to know what their weaknesses, where they're vulnerable, and that's where they come in. And they may say, hey, I'm going to be over at Arborville Mall. I'm going to go to, I forgot the name of the place, Johnny Rockets. Why don't you join me for some French fries and a milkshake? They're savvy. They know how to work with our kids. This was always an interesting one for me. The routes of domestic sex violence. Atlanta is one of 2 cities with 6 connections. They've got 2 routes directly to Florida, Tampa and Miami. That hit home when I knew I came from Tampa and I hadn't even heard of sex trafficking. To North Carolina, up to Detroit, to New Orleans. Another big city is Las Vegas. So it's looking at these routes, and then from those, they can branch out to other places. Okay. Our mission is reach, rescue, and restore. Princess Night, Jeff talked about our Princess Night. This is a volunteer. Anybody can sign up. You can go to the Out of Darkness website, and it's really an interesting adventure or journey. They do a training before they take you out, and the whole thing is just to make a contact, give a rose, give a card. On the card is a hotline number. And it's amazing.
What you see up here is the Facebook post. Anybody that likes Out of Darkness, anytime there's a rescue in progress, that goes out over Facebook. They have hundreds of people on the prayer line. Automatically, prayers go out.
Yeah.
Automatically.
It's one of those teams that, as part of a rescue team, I think is so important, especially for some people who think, well, I can't do a rescue, or I have little kids, so doing the hotline and it's 24/7, I really can't take that time. But even just to be part of the prayer team, I can tell you, my friends say, aren't you scared when you go out there? Not at all, because I know that there are 150 people plus praying for me and for this lady that we're going to pick up, that there is a calmness and a peace that comes in. So if you're somebody who thinks, oh, I would love to get involved in something like this, but I have children, or I have a job, or things that I can't get into something like what we're doing, prayer team, you're very important to us. Okay. Our safe home. It says 3 weeks, but it depends. When we pick up a young lady and we take them to a safe home, They're there for about 3 weeks. It could be a little longer, it could be a little shorter. They're given a case manager. They get to know them. They get to know what is it that they like? What do they want to do with their life? It's faith-based, so there is prayer, there is Bible study, but they start giving them a little bit of what a home family life is like. We have over 50 partners nationwide. One of the things I'd have to say about one of the programs that we went to, it was one of the rescues we went to. I was lucky enough to get to know her a little bit, so they asked me if I'd like to take her to her program. I said, sure, I'd love to. And I get a call a couple days later. They let her call me because she was so upset. And it made me think of the little ones that you were talking about, because I think she was like 26, 25. She was so upset and in tears crying because they gave her a Walmart gift card because they wanted her to go buy what she needed. They wanted her to go buy a brush and toothpaste and things like that. And she crying because she didn't know how to do it. She hadn't been allowed to do anything like that. So she didn't even know what to pick up that she might need because it was always furnished by the pimp of what he thought she needed. And it was just one of those first steps that they tried to do to get her to think. Several times when we go on a rescue, one of the things we do is we go through a drive-through to get them something to eat. And a lot of them won't even know what to pick because they're not allowed to do that.
What do you want? You mean I can have anything?
Yeah, will you pick it out for me? No? What do you feel like? So it's just those little things that we take for granted that, you know, if they've been in the life since they were 14 and they are 26, they don't know how to do those things. Okay?
Now, on that young lady that she's referring to, on average it takes 7 rescues for a young lady to come out of the life. Okay? The young lady that she's referring to was the 4th time that we'd rescued her. One time we'd rescued her off the back porch of the Pink Pony. Okay? We backed up to it. Her representative, her mentor, was there with her, called us, said, you got a 30-minute window to get here. We were there in about 12. But needless to say, I'm not going to say I was speeding with the people we have here. But we got there in plenty of time to get her out safely, okay? Now, this same young lady we rescued again 3 months later from the GBI office. She was in there for 48 hours talking with detectives, turning over evidence toward her pimp. Her pimp was a 67-year-old man that came into the GBI office while she was there. He started walking over toward her as she was talking to 5 detectives. One of those detectives got up, walked over to the young man and said, that's not a good career move. She's got 5 detectives around him that are heavily armed and know extremely how to use those weapons, so that wouldn't be a good career move. The guy looks at her, turns around and walks out. The detective walked back over to this young lady and said, if you leave here, you're dead. Bottom line, he saw you in here talking to us. He knows why you're here. If you leave here, you walk out, you don't get help, you're dead. Okay? So needless to say, there was a Christian gathering at a church downtown Atlanta 3 weeks ago that we went to. She walked by us, didn't recognize us. She got up 2 rows in front of us, turned around, and then came back and hugged. Are you Jeff? Yes, ma'am, I am. You saved my life. You're Tammy. Yes, ma'am. You saved my life. That's the things that we want to do. We want to go forward with. Out of Darkness provides us that platform to do that. Okay? And I hated to go into the gory details with you're dead, but it is a serious thing out there. Okay? So that young lady, I want to say, had been rescued 5 times. Okay? She's right now doing really well and surviving. Okay?
I asked her, I said, why did it, why this time? Why this time? And she said he brought her his 11-year-old daughter into the stable and told the ladies of the stable, you're training her for the business. She said it was like a block hit me. She says, I have a little girl at home that's living with her mother. And because she's in this cycle, what was the chance for her daughter to be in that same situation? And it was just that reality check that hit her. You know, I'd like to say that other times, you know, those seeds that it was a safe place and she had gone through programs. But the addiction is strong, and it's hard for them. And then when that's all they know, you know, but this was just one of those things that hit her. You are chosen to tell about the excellent qualities of God. Go back to that. We've got a really quick video about Princess Knight, and it's one of our survivors. I heard one of you all talk about not calling them victims because they are survivors. Even the ones that relapse, they come back to us and they're so filled with guilt and so filled with shame. And I tell them, just think of the strength you have just to come back. I think it's amazing because they have a lot of years to break this chain. So this is just a verse that Out of Darkness kind of reflects on. You are chosen to tell about the excellent qualities of God who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. We know that it takes some time for them, but we need the call. We need everyone's help to do this call. I know Jeff and I, we've had 4 rescues, I think, right here in Douglasville. And so now it's close to home. It's not Atlanta. It is Atlanta, but it's out here. It's in Powder Springs, Alpharetta, Dallas. These are places you don't expect it. These are homes that are nice homes. They're not inner city. It's not HUD homes. These are places you would never expect it. And so thank you for Douglasville and Felicia for bringing this and getting more awareness out, because the more people who know it and know about it, the more power there is with those numbers.
Okay, thank you. Dalia Racine, she is from the District Attorney's Office, DeKalb County. So as soon as they get her computer set up, we will have the final presentation, and you can go ahead and gather your questions, and we can do a quick Q&A answer.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Dalia Racine, and I'm Deputy Chief Assistant District Attorney over the CCAC unit in DeKalb County DA's office. CCAC stands for Sexual Exploitation and Crimes Against Children. I've been a prosecutor my entire career, and when I was in the Fulton DA's office back in 2008 in the Crimes Against Women and Children unit, I received my first human trafficking case. At the time, there was not even a human trafficking law in the state of Georgia. It was only pimping persons under 18, which was a felony. But a couple of years prior to that, it was a misdemeanor to sell and buy children for sex in the state of Georgia. So to commend our lawmakers, we have come a really long way in becoming progressive about treating this epidemic for what it is. So let's get started. I'm going to skip a bunch of slides because you guys have heard some of the information from our other excellent presenters, and I don't want to duplicate what they've said. But when you're talking about human trafficking and CSEC, human trafficking is the big umbrella that incorporates sex and labor servitude of adults and minors. When you talk about CSEC, commercially sexually exploited children, you're carving that down to just children and just sexual servitude. Make sense, everyone? So when you hear the acronym CSEC, we went all over the country teaching what CSEC was, and then the feds changed it on us and changed it to DMST, Domestic Minor Sex Trafficking. So there's a lot of different types: street prostitution, pornography, stripping, erotic nude massage, internet-based exploitation, phone sex lines, private parties, gang-based prostitution, interfamilial pimping, which we already heard about, and escort services. Anybody want to guess which is the most common type? Where's everything being sold now? On the internet, including our children. Does anybody know the #1 seller of our children here in the US? Which website? Backpage, backpage.com. A lot of folks have not heard of Backpage. Think of Craigslist, where there is some legitimate purposes for Backpage, but the main purpose of how it's making its bread and butter is off of selling people for sex. That is the main way that they are making their money. So when we talk about what CSEC looks like in the United States, first off, 1.6 million children run away from home each year in the US. And earlier when we did the chart, we saw that runaways came up. That was excellent. I don't remember who said that, but that's an excellent word to describe this, because being a runaway is one of the biggest indicators as to whether or not you will be taken into the world of sex trafficking. Studies show that 1 in 3 teens will become a victim of CSEC within 48 hours of leaving home. It's pretty quick. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because if you have a 14 or 15-year-old that's running away from home, they usually have not packed a bag, they don't have a bank account, they didn't bring a bunch of food with them, so very quickly their most basic needs are not being met. And so they become very vulnerable to a lot of people who would like to exploit them. The average age of entry, like you heard, in the US is 12. I could tell you that there is one organization that all of the children who are trafficked and located by police are referred to. It's called Georgia Cares. Georgia Cares studies show that here in Georgia, our average age of entry is about 14 or 15 years old. So we're averaging a little bit higher than a 12-year-old, but it does not mean that we don't have 12-year-olds that are being sold. Currently on our caseload docket, our youngest victim is 9. This is just a chart showing that NCMEC, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, if anybody has heard of that organization, their studies also corroborate that the runaway link is very strong with sex trafficking. You saw the route previously of the route map that shows the different jurisdictions and routes that kids are sold for trafficking. This is a map by another excellent research organization called Polaris Project. And what they did was they created a thermal map based off of referrals that they receive. So Polaris started a national hotline, a 1-800 number. If anybody suspects that somebody is being trafficked, they can call this number. Whether you're in Walmart and you see something that looks suspicious, wherever it is, anybody can call this number. Then they link to local law enforcement and they'll make the referral. And so based off of the referrals that they received, this is what it looked like, obviously red being the most. Everybody see where our area is? You see how we're pretty and all lit up in red, aren't we? So let's talk about what's happening in Georgia. While we estimate that there's about hundreds of girls trafficked each month, there's no exact studies, unfortunately, that tell us. This is a crime of secrecy, and especially since it's gone online, it's virtually untraceable in a lot of different venues. So it's really hard for us to have an accurate gauge of how many kids are being sold. There are estimates that thousands of men are buying sex with minors. There was also a study that was done to figure out who are these men that are buying sex. Are they pedophiles? Like, who is it that's actually out there trying to purchase sex with these kids? So a study was set up where they did a fake chat line. I don't know if anybody looks at creative loafing, or used to be when you got on TV really late at night. It would be like, feeling lonely, call 1-900, whatever, whatever. So they set up a fake organization like that. And when they did, different men would call in, obviously looking to purchase sex. And they would give these men 3 progressive warnings. The first one being, hey, we think she's under 18. Hey, we're pretty sure she's under 18. And the last one saying, look, she's under 18. 47% of the men still went through with the purchase. Still wanted to go through with the purchase, I should say. So what that showed was that even though most men were not looking for underage girls, that almost half were not deterred when they found out it was an underage child that they were purchasing. I'm going to skip all this. This is just talking about, in summary, just what we noticed with our county is that the more we educated folks, starting with law enforcement, working our way to different service providers and schools, that we saw we had a huge influx of these cases. So it's not that anyone is immune, any area is immune. It's once you get the entire community on the same page to say we're going to do something about this where we live, is that's when you see the cases skyrocket. And it can be done in any jurisdiction. This is just a chart showing that the biggest seller obviously is the internet. You'll see a big drop in February 2010. February 2010 is when Craigslist escort services link was shut down. And so where they chopped off the head of one beast, Backpage emerged as the new leader. And we see many ways that kids are being sold now, even Instagram. You can find posts selling kids for sex. It's really any internet venue, any way that they can communicate is how they're being sold. But Backpage does lead. So what we have to do is we have to deal with the misinterpretation of this topic. It's easy sitting in this room now to be horrified by what you're hearing, as you should be. But the reality of what it looks like is that girl that doesn't come like running into your arms and saying, thank you so much for rescuing me. The reality is that we find that 16, 17-year-old who comes to us, cusses us out, tells us that she loves him, he's the best thing that ever happened to her, and we're just trying to ruin their family. Meanwhile, she says she enjoys prostituting, she does it on her own, he doesn't make her do anything. The one thing that we usually ask her is, well, how much money do you have in your pocket? Because the answer is pretty typically none. All of it's in his. And so what we see a lot of is what we call the boyfriend pimps. It's the mental manipulation. This isn't, a lot of times the Hollywood version is the gorilla pimp, because there's two different types. There's the finesse pimp, which is the boyfriend pimp, and the gorilla pimp, which is the one that you see maybe snatching the girl off the street corner, throwing her in the car, chaining her to the bed. Does it happen? Rarely. What we mostly see is that these guys and girls are getting into these kids' heads. And you don't need chains, you don't need handcuffs, you don't need ties, because once you have them mentally caught up, you can keep them in bondage without having anything restraining them. And so what we have to deal with a lot of times is the misconceptions. And if I may be brutally honest, women, we are oftentimes the harshest on each other, right? Can we all agree on that? And so when we see the girl come in with the short top, the shorts, the low top, the short skirt, the high heels, we usually are quick to pass judgment. And what we see is that a lot of times people judge the victims of these crimes. They think, well, she's just choosing to get into it. It's a glamorous life. It's the pretty woman syndrome. It's not that bad. Julia Roberts made it seem so glamorous. Is it really horrible that it's an easy way for a child to gain wealth and independence? It's a victimless crime. If they really were a victim, then she'd act like one. But the realities are quite different. We're not going to play that because y'all already heard it. So the truth is that they don't choose prostitution. They're young and vulnerable kids. Again, you have to think of the mentality of a teenager. Yes, they think they know it all, but the reality is that most of them couldn't survive 2 minutes on the street by themselves. And so they're very vulnerable to these other individuals. We talked about them being runaways. The other big factor, 70 to 90% have already been sexually abused. Why is that significant? You've been taught your body does not belong to you. You've been taught that others can do whatever they want to you and there's no recourse. And so you're already groomed to be sold for sex to multiple men each night. And for some of these girls, what they say is, you know what? It's better with my pimp, because when my stepdad comes in and rapes me every night, I get nothing out of it. At least with my pimp, I get my hair and nails done. That is the standards that they are looking at when they're deciding to stay in this life. A lot of them are coming from troubled homes where abuse, neglect, parental crime, drug addiction are issues, truancy. They're facing a lot of different issues within their home. Sorry, y'all, my PowerPoint wants to act up a little bit. You hear me talking about girls a lot. So far, I would say 99% of the cases that we receive in DeKalb are female victims. But there are most certainly male victims out there. EPCAT did a study, a nationwide study, and found that as many as 50%, half of the C-sec children were boys. What they found about the boys, there's higher rates of childhood sexual abuse, street sexual victimization, more injuries. One theory is that because the male buyers of boys maybe are portraying themselves as heterosexuals, and so when they purchase the boys, there's a lot of self-hate that's happening that they inflict on the boys that they're buying, because they're having more broken bones, more stabbing, more injuries, things along that. Women typically are more emotional creatures, and so for the male population, it's a lot more of meeting basic needs. And so I go around teaching this to a lot of kids, especially in at-risk schools, in alternative schools. And I got a lot of tough guys sitting in the audience looking at me saying, never, ever. And I tell them, really, when's the last time you were outside in a t-shirt and shorts when it was 30 degrees out? when you thought you were about to catch hypothermia? Or when's the last time you haven't eaten in 72 hours? And I apologize for being graphic, but sometimes performing oral sex is better than performing in the morgue. And that's how they think. If I don't do this act, I will be dead by tomorrow. Majority of the C-sec boys are heterosexual. This is survival sex for them. This is them trying to get to the next day. The national average age of entry is even younger for boys, 11 to 13. Case right out of here. Douglas County, they were running a boy ring out of where we all live. So you know if it's happening here. It is happening here. They were convicted. So we talk about why is it such a big problem in Atlanta. You've heard probably some people say Atlanta's the hub or the worst. We're not the worst. What happened was the FBI put out a list of the top 10, and it was an alphabetical list. And so, of course, Atlanta was the top of that list. But we do have a problem in metro Atlanta. And so our issue is that we have prostitution by appointment, Hartsfield Airport. We have a huge adult entertainment industry here. I mean, how many of us don't know where a strip club is? I need the young man in the back to keep his hand down. But, I mean, you can find one everywhere. You know where they are. The large hotels with the busy lobbies, the motels near the strip clubs, the escort services, we create the perfect petri dish for this to thrive within metro Atlanta because of accessibility. And let's talk about usually the unspoken party in this, the buyers. The buyers, based off of that same study, they track where they were coming from. 23% were from south outside of the perimeter, 26% from the urban core inside the perimeter, 9% from the airport area, but 42% were from north outside of the perimeter. Any idea why that is? What's there more of up there? Money. You got to have disposable income if you're going to pay $150 to $300 an hour to have sex. They'll place orders from all over the state of Georgia, and about half prefer the girl to come to his locale. So there's a difference. There's something called in-calls and out-calls within the sex trade. The in-call is the guy comes to the girl. The out-call is the girl goes to the guy. So even if you don't have a hub in your jurisdiction where it's happening in your hotels per se, there are men that are capable of ordering up a girl like a pizza. I would like one that looks like this, and I want her to do this when she gets here. And let me also explain something to you. When a girl or boy is purchased, they are no longer a person. They're a property. And there is no more right to say no. The only thing that it involves is an extra fee. Doesn't matter what she says. Doesn't matter what he says. If that buyer wants to do it to them, the only thing the pimp is worried about is that they'll be compensated. Consent is not an issue when it comes to this. So we talk about why it's such a big problem. Well, number one, it's hard to detect, right? If you got somebody running dope across the Atlanta area, you send out the dogs can alert on the car, you got your PC, you search the car, you've made your case. But what happens when the guy's driving around with two younger girls and he says those are his nieces? It's a little harder to detect what's happening, especially if no one's talking. It's a renewable resource. What you saw earlier was about how there's an increase with gang activity, utilizing human trafficking. Well, what we're seeing is that within the criminal world, this has moved up to the #1 position only after drugs and now has leaped ahead of guns as the top 3 crime problems in the US. And the reason is that how many times can you sell that kilo of cocaine? How many times can you sell that assault rifle? But that 15-year-old, 10 to 15 times a night, every day of the week. She doesn't get off days. He doesn't get off days. So it's very easy to keep your product out there. The other thing is the access to the supply. We have a lot of runaways. We have not cured the reason that kids run away. One of the biggest indicators you saw is a lot of kids are running away from being abused at home. Who wants to tackle that subject? Who wants to deal with how do we stop child abuse? You think tackling human trafficking is difficult? Let's talk about child abuse. So we're going to consistently have that access to supply. The high demand. We have, honestly, normalized sex buying in our country. When people bring it up, they say, oh, it's just boys being boys. What's the big deal? She's making money, he's getting happy. So where's the issue? Nobody wants to talk about the drug addiction that she picks up because she's tired of being penetrated by strangers. Nobody wants to talk about the STIs and the STDs that she picks up. Nobody wants to talk about her numerous sexual assaults that she has to encounter, because I can tell you, I've talked to dozens of these victims, whether they are 12, 13, or whether they're 23 or 30. It is very difficult for me to find any that will say they have not been raped more than once. It's the reality of being in the life. And it's lucrative. You saw the slide earlier about $32,000 a week. The studies are really everywhere. We don't know. A lot of times, as far as investigations, we have a really hard time finding the money. They're very good at hiding the money and even better at spending it. It's not like they're investing in 401ks. A lot of times they're buying drugs, alcohol, hotel rooms, disposable commodities that is very hard for us to trace where the money goes. Other issue we have as a society is we glorify pimps. It is a compliment to be called a pimp. When you hear things about the pimp cup, get one of those at Arbor Place Mall. Halloween, dress your kid up as a pimp. Pimp My Ride, Pimp Chronicles, or you can even get your baby a onesie that says Playground Pimp. It is a term of endearment. It is a term of congratulations. Now the victims, anybody remember the song P.I.M.P. by 50 Cent? Don't make me sing. Read the lyrics really quickly and see how the victims are portrayed on a song that was played across the U.S. on every major radio station. Now, I didn't know till I looked up the lyrics that that's what it said. All I was saying was, I don't know what you heard about me. But that's what it was saying. This I will skip through. I'm very cognizant of everyone's time. This is the reality of what human trafficking looks like. This young lady, who actually was an adult, and by adult I mean she was 18, was being sold and trafficked, and she wanted to get out. And so she called somebody who she thought was a friend and said, please come get me. And when they came, she said, I'll meet you at the Varsity. I'll just tell my pimp that I got a date, because that's what it's called when they get ordered by a man. And so she goes up to the Varsity. She sees her friends, and she thinks, finally, I get to go home. She gets in the car, and she quickly notices that they are taking her right back to where she came from. What she didn't know was that these friends had called her pimp and said, one of your girls is trying to run. Don't worry, we got you. Bring her right back to the hotel she had just escaped from, and her pimp didn't put one hand on her. But the 3 or 4 other girls he was working out of that hotel room, he told them, you know what to do. And they beat her down. They beat her with bottles, they beat her with shoes, with fists, whatever they could find. And it's kind of hard to see on this picture. She actually has braids in her hair. And at the top of her head, they yanked her braids so hard she was partially scalped. And this is only maybe an hour or 2 after the injury. So you know she looked even worse the next day. The way that she was found was because this was Fulton County. They were looking for a underage girl. They got a tip that there was an underage girl being worked out of this same hotel. They show up, and they're just doing knock and talks, just knocking on the doors. And for some reason, they open the door, and this young lady is shoved in a dog crate. And that's how the rescue happens. I don't want to just sit here and give you all the problems. I'm very solution-driven, and so I will end on this. Get involved, get educated, talk to your kids about it. You have to talk to the kids in your life about this subject. You can't act like it's not happening. And I can assure you that some of you may be really shocked at how much your kids already know about this, what they've heard about what's happening with their friends, what they hear what's happening going on with their apps. Number two, support the nonprofit, the service providers that are out there that are helping out these kids that are caught up in this life and the young ladies that are caught up in this life. And then the third thing is specifically to the men in the room. You have got to have these conversations with your groups of male circles, whether it be in your place of worship, your place of employment, in your home, wherever it is, and you have to stop normalizing the exploitive behavior. It starts with strip clubs and it moves to prostitution. That is the reality of what this looks like. You need to have open dialogue about pornography and the dangers of that and how that leads into sex buying as well. Because as women, for us to come and tell you guys that, it's us nagging. But when a man tells another man in his peer group, and he's respected in his peer group, and he says, that's not cool. No, we shouldn't go to the strip club. No, you know what? Most of those girls have been abused and are drug addicted, and it's not good for us to support that. That is where we start to make the change in the demand. So thank you all very much. I appreciate your time.
I am just downright giddy right now. And I'm excited because I love the fact that people are getting this knowledge. And it's just something that all of us who have stood before you this evening and talked to you about, and we're just very passionate about it. So now we're going to open up for the Q&A session. Should you have any questions, you can feel free to go to the microphone that's in the center of the room, and we'll try to field your questions.
So what kind of evidence do you need to arrest people?
So when we're talking about the pimp, the exploiter in the situation, if it's an underage girl, it does not require an excessive amount. If we can prove that she's underage and she's being sold for sex, then we can meet the elements of the crime. I have literally tried cases that had no victim. If the victim's not cooperative, the victim goes missing, but I could prove those elements, then we are still able to go forward. When it comes to adult victims, which is 18 and up, even though the age of consent in Georgia is 16, for the purposes of trafficking, it's under 18 is a victim, a child victim. And so for 18 and up, we have to have the added elements of coercion and deception. Now, those are pretty easy to prove because all we have to show is they're either giving them drugs, they're keeping them complicit, they are threatening to expose what they're doing to loved ones, keeping documents, things like that, or physical abuse. So sometimes if we're embedded, our office oftentimes embeds with law enforcement when they're doing the operations, and even if it's an adult female, we'll look for bruising because that can be an element of the coercion and deception as well.
Hi, I have two questions. One in Douglas County that we're in, are there any particular hubs where prostitution is taking place? And the other question, I know you said it's harder to do, but with childhood abuse, are there some programs that are at least making a little difference in stopping this type of behavior?
I'll let the chief answer the first one.
A couple of months ago, we with the FBI and the GBI task force, we had an operation on Thornton Road where we arrested about 12 individuals, some pimps and ladies, and we got guns, drugs, all kind of things out of that operation. We ran another operation over here at the hotel off Westmoreland Plaza, and a young underage girl was being pimped by a gentleman that was, she was living at their house. The same young girl, the FBI knew of her and was trying to help her. So they took over that particular case. So yes, we were having some issues with that here in Douglas County, as is everywhere. It's like Ms. Racine talked about the back page, these social media outlets you can get on to go in and try to find some person to get involved with in this crime, but we're actively involved in investigating these cases and bringing these people to justice.
Chief's exactly right. There's not, so the strip, what used to be like where you would find all the girls walking and whatnot is pretty much non-existent. I mean, there's some areas, but since it's gone online, everything's happening everywhere all at the same time, unfortunately. For the child abuse question, I think one of the most important things as a sex crimes prosecutor, number one is teaching your children proper body part names so that they know what their anatomy is. And number two, allowing your children to have boundaries, allowing your children to have ownership over their own boundaries. What that looks like is, and I was notorious for this with my daughter, you know, just culturally it was always, oh, give so-and-so a hug. We need to stop doing that. If she doesn't want to give somebody a hug, she doesn't have to give somebody a hug. Because what we're doing when we do that is we're teaching them that you don't have ownership over your body. You don't have ownership over your own boundaries. You're going to be respectful, but you don't have to touch somebody or be touched. Even in that non-sexual way, you can still establish that boundary and know that. The other thing is having conversations with your children about sex at an appropriate age, and that could start as young as 5 or it could be 10. By 10, they're going to learn it from their friends. So if you want them to know the real facts, you got to tell them. And then having open lines of communication. And stranger danger, while it is a thing, most children are molested by somebody who the parents trust them with, whether it be a parent themselves, a family member, a close friend. And so it's just about being ever vigilant and making sure your kids are in safe environments, because predators want the guardian's trust so they can have access to the prey.
And there are, Loronda, what is the name of the training, the child abuse training? Stewards for Children. There is Darkness to Light, Stewards of Children. It's an excellent training. If you are licensed, you can get, I believe it's 1 CEU. 2 CEUs? Oh, it's 2. Okay, 2 CEUs. But community members can go through it, and it specifically speaks to how to talk to your children. I believe in one of the scenarios, a little girl told her teacher that her daddy ate her cookie last night. And she was like, oh, that's nice. And she went on. But what it meant is her father had performed oral sex on her. He ate her cookie. That's what the dad coached her to call it, right? So knowing that, no, you have a vagina, you have breasts, you have a penis, and know what those body parts are for is something that's very, very important. So if you can look up Darkness to Light, Children of Stewards, D2L.org. That's an excellent tool for you guys to utilize. And if you want training on it, let us know. Apparently, we just do free training. That's what we do. We just like to get it out there. And that's something that I believe we have talked about doing, so we can look at that. What's your
question for the organization?
Okay.
I just wanted to know, because they said that you guys house the survivors for 3 weeks. What is the follow-up for that, or what do you do or provide for them within that 3 weeks?
We take them to the safe house. At the safe house, they're there from anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. It just depends on the program that they're waiting for a bed for. And then we get them to their program. Most of the programs are anywhere from 12 to 18 months. They're not offered. We get them there, and most of the time we pay, or they get it through a foundation. But there's programs all over the United States. We've got girls in Baltimore, we've got girls in Texas, we've got them all over. Because sometimes they want to leave the Atlanta area. They don't want to go to one that's here. Yeah.
Okay, the follow-up, I mean, they choose with their mentor and their guidance counselor. Once they're in the safe house, they're given a counselor. And they talk to them to see what programs would be best fitted for them and where they need to go. Then they will be sent to that home. It's of their choice. It's not that we have specific ones we use, but they're all available. And they pick the one that's best for the survivor.
They usually try to line up. They're with a case manager for that 3 weeks, and they get to know the girls and some of the things that they've been through. What is their special need? And then they usually try to find 3 programs that kind of fit more their profile. And then, once again, it's trying to get them to take some ownership, Because if I said to you, okay, we're going to send you here, once again, somebody else is taking control of your life. So they like to set up 3 programs that are kind of within the realm of what they need. If it's therapy and counseling and rehab, drug addiction, usually all of the above. But then they let them make the choice because it's part of their help of taking some ownership for their own life.
Yes, sir.
I'm wondering what is the data like in terms of children that are in or coming out of home placement, in terms, because there's a lot of sexual abuse, physical abuse, and then some of these children are also becoming predators. So I'm wondering what is the stats like with children that are being rescued, or for the older ones that are prostitute. What is the information that you're getting in terms of how many have experienced out-of-home placement?
I don't have specific studies on it, but I know just from the cases that I've handled, personally within the DA's office, there is a high percentage that are coming out of foster care, that are being abused, that are being that are in the runaway status, that are then being exploited. So I would say that yes, there is probably a very high correlation between being placed in foster care and being susceptible to it. So yeah, but there's no official studies yet.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I do not want you to leave here fearful. I don't want you to leave here feeling overwhelmed. There are 2 organizations that have been represented here, Out of Darkness, Star Institute, that you can connect with, and you can turn all of this frustration that you're feeling right now into positive action. So I would encourage you to connect and really contribute to their work. And I also want to thank Chief Sparks. I called him right before Thanksgiving, and he was very welcoming and said yes. You know, we followed up and we're able to be here. So thank you so much for facilitating this forum. So I'll let you come and close it out, sir.
You did good. Thank all of you. I want to thank all of you for coming out, and give everybody that presented a great round of applause. And, Mayor Pro Tem, you want to have a word to say before we get out of here? Last word.
I'm between you and your car.
Yeah.
Well, first, Chief, I just want to thank you for holding this, having this forum here, and all the amazing speakers. But most importantly, I want to thank all the members of the community who actually showed up, because you can have all the forums you want. If nobody's here to listen, it doesn't do any good. So thank you, everybody, for being here. And have a good night.